and Member of Parliament for Pru East. Doc, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, this recent claim by the minority that we are actually experiencing load shedding, about 500 megawatts worth of it. What's the basis for this? We're told that there is maintenance going on. Would that not explain any shortfall?
Will the people experiencing outages, do they need a basis to accept our proposition? If a plant is shut down for maintenance, and that is why we have redundancy, assuming it's the Ghana gas processing plant that is shut down for maintenance, our thermal plants are dual fuel, and therefore the inability to supply gas will not let the thermal plants not fire. They will be fired by light crude oil. And so the maintenance argument does not make sense. Yes, Ghana gas facility could be on shut down for maintenance. I'm not disputing that possibility. But Ghana gas is only a fuel supplier. In fact, they supply less than 50% of the fuel needs of the thermal sector. ENI supplies more. And as we speak, ENI has reduced the quantum of gas they're supplying because we haven't paid them for more than 3 months. So there are real issues. Attempting to use CR to shift the goalposts wouldn't stick. We are saying definitively that there's a shortfall in generation for our 500 megawatts generated by inadequate fuel. Right. We are unable to pay for fuel. We owe so much on fuel, and that is critical. So the dressings, the gymnastics do not take away the reality. The reality is that we are in a financial crunch in the power sector. And arising out of that crunch, we are unable to meet our obligations. And it has ripple effects.
So currently, your estimation is about 500 megawatts.
As of yesterday.
As of yesterday. What's your projection? Do you expect this to get worse, or is there some money on the way to pay up the bills so that we can make up the shortfall?
I believe the Ministry of Finance is best placed to answer that question. The Ministry of Finance and government. We wouldn't know if they have money stuck somewhere that they will assess to pay. We wouldn't know as a minority. But we are only stating the reality.
So your current assessment or analysis is that this is load shedding, and it's because we cannot buy fuel. Now, you've estimated about 500 megawatts.
500 megawatts.
Yes, about 500, yes.
We have not estimated. That is, if the Grid Code Systems Control Center will be allowed to talk to you, they will confirm you. But I know they will not be allowed.
Okay, but
the state is trying to conceal the shortfall, but you cannot. When the people are living in darkness, it's not the sort of thing. It's like pregnancy. It's not the sort of thing you can hide.
Okay, now, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, let's look at something. You've talked about the fact that when people are living in darkness, you cannot hide. And I just would want your thought on something, because just yesterday we've heard of the resignation of the MD of ECG. But as one who knows the power sector, over the last 2 years, what would you say has been the state of our power sector, particularly ECG?
Well, we have been consistent that our power sector is in crisis. We've been very consistent on that over the last 2 years. There are structural challenges, there are managerial challenges, and then there are challenges of priority. For example, the ECG is expected to collect on a monthly basis about 2 billion cedis to break even. ECG in the last 2 months has been collecting about 800 million cedis.
Yeah.
About 42% of what they're expected to collect. When you have that situation, and then the Ministry of Finance has also said, arising out of the shortfalls, they were also going to support monthly with 200 to 250 million cedis to purchase fuel. The Ministry of Finance has not also lived up to its commitment. And so we have these two situations where collections are inadequate, in fact, woefully inadequate. And the Ministry of Finance is not, as usual, living up to its promises. And so, and take this against the backdrop that the payables in the power sector are largely dollar denominated. The receivables are CD denominated.
Sure.
And with the deterioration of the exchange rate against the CD, what ECG needed last month to pay for a parcel of crude in CD terms, or to pay for gas, to pay IPPs in CD terms, has increased this month because of the further deterioration of the CD. So we have huge under-recovery. And that is what I talk about, the structural problem.
Okay.
We are under-recovering costs. And in any business, when you under-recover costs, that business becomes unsustainable.
But Dr. Donkor, I mean, let's look at something. So yes, you're talking, and I want you to explain. If it's under recovery, you know that this is how much you're expected to collect. You have done your budgeting and you say, this is how much I intend to collect. Aside the depreciation of the Ghana cedi, at least it should be possible for you to collect the 2 billion that you say you're able to collect, isn't it?
Well, they are unable to collect arising out of, again, structural and managerial lapses. Structural lapses because ECG loses about 30% of the power they purchase in technical and commercial losses. And since your markup will always be less than that figure, there's very few businesses in Ghana who have a markup of 30%. And so when you're losing 30% through technical and commercial losses, the commercial losses are plain thievery, decorated in fine English. So they are stealing the power. Sometimes with the connivance of workers of ECG, technicians. The technical losses arise out of underinvestment. When you have obsolete equipment, when you have transformers that are inadequate, you overloaded, etc. And so the shareholder ordinarily, when there is underinvestment, the shareholder ordinarily must pump money into the entity because it's the shareholder's responsibility to provide the entity with adequate working capital. And the shareholder happens to be all of us represented by SIGA as a shareholder of record. So there is that, and that is what I talk about, a structural issue. When about 80% of your payables are dollar denominated and 95% of your receivables are CD denominated, and when you have a macro economy and particularly monetary policy that is so debilitating, of course it will impact on you. So
Okay.
that is the structural problem. But there are also managerial issues.
Yeah, but before we get to the managerial issues, I mean, we're talking about somewhere 2021. I remember then Minister of Energy, Dr. Matthew Poku Prempe, came up with the Doom CACA. At the time, we said we're making huge investments. Subsequently, we've talked about investments, in the sector. We've talked about the change of transformers. Are you saying all of these things amounted to nothing?
If you have an investment requirement of $1 billion, and then you put in $100 million, you would have done some investment. Somebody will call that huge investment. But in terms of relativity, relative to the quantum of investment needed, it will still be inadequate. I do not deny the fact that the government has put in some investment, but the investment the state put in is nowhere near the requirement. Let me go back to immediate history.
Okay.
It was not for nothing that initially the Atanos John Mahama government and later the John Mahama government approached the Millennium Development Corporation of America that, look, our major requirement is investment in the distribution sector. And ECG is the kingpin in the distribution sector. It was out of that we had a compact agreement. Unfortunately, arising out of greed and mismanagement, we botched up even the privatization, which led to the PDS debacle. So there has been we have recognized the need for investment. We have recognized the need to retool ECG. However, and that is where the mismanagement starts, arising out of political opportunism, arising out of greed, we messed up with that. And so the chickens have come home to roost. That is where we are. So whatever investments that the then minister said were being made were totally inadequate to meet the challenge.
Okay.
You don't resolve a $1 billion investment gap with a $100 million injection.
So let's look at the managerial problems that you talk about then. What are they beyond what you've said to us?
Well, the Ministry of Energy, PULC, have had issues with the management style of ECG. And they play this out in the public domain. And that was also accompanied by political infighting, leading to the resignation of the board chair of ECG months ago. And today the MD has also resigned. So again, that is symptomatic of the instability, the managerial instability arising out of different drives. They are being driven along different paths. And so that is a major challenge. That is a major challenge. Going forward, the Ghanaian state must come to the conclusion that some of us have come to, that we will need to take a second look at the ECG structure. Must ECG be responsible for everything? Some of us believe no. The last mile, billing, collection, fault reporting, fault finding, we can bring in private sector capital and private sector expertise, whilst ECG still runs the main frame of the system.
Okay.
So we will have to look at the structure. If something has not worked for you over years, you must take a second look at it. But importantly, we must take a second look at the macroeconomy, especially monetary policy.
Okay.
Monetary policy that arises that gives rise to currency instability. And the CD has been very, very unstable. And that instability impacts on the operations of not just ECG, but of NETCO, of VRA, of GRIDCO. The power sector is very negatively impacted by the instability. CD price rises alone cannot meet or compensate for that instability.
Okay, I get that, and we'll subsequently have a broader conversation about even the structure of ECG and what it should do. But you talk about a third problem, which is what our priorities. What about that?
Yes. For example, ECG is spending $40 million a month in buying light crude oil. Meanwhile, we are not paying for the natural gas that we're using. We are in serious deficit. Natural gas is cheaper than light crude. It's more efficient in terms of operations. Again, for environmental reasons, it's also a better fuel. So why would we be more interested in buying light crude oil than paying for the natural gas we use? And that is where the priority comes in. Let's
just deal with this a little bit. So when you say ECG is buying light crude oil, help us understand, because you also have a very good understanding of some of these IPPs. Is it the responsibility of the distributor, as in ECG, to be procuring LCO, light crude oil, for these entities?
Yes, it is the responsibility. Under the contract we sign, fuel is a cost that we call pass-through.
Okay. And the fuel could have been natural gas?
Yes, fuel, natural gas, distillate, for example, the VRA plants, the Pontema plants uses diesel as well. Diesel and is dual fuel, diesel and natural gas.
Okay.
Other plants use natural gas and light crude oil. The AXA plant uses light crude and heavy fuel oil. So fuel as a whole is passed through. If you ask them to go and buy fuel, and they buy fuel at a higher price and pass it on to you, you are not being prudent. If you are buying the fuel yourself, all things being equal, you know you will be able to minimize the cost of fuel. It is for that reason that in those contracts, the obligation to provide fuel was put on the Ghanaian state, represented by ECG in those contracts.
But do we also know, for instance, whether in buying this fuel, the agreement at the time, what we believed was right, was the fact that if we bought it, all things being equal, we'll buy it at a lower rate. But was that really the reality? Were we buying it at a lower rate?
Well, we have had issues with the agents we use. We have had issues with the agents we use. We are using a private company linked to a particular family in the political space.
Which family, Dr. Kwabena Donkor?
I will leave that. You are an investigative journalist. Find out.
I will find out. But let's get to the natural gas, because we know that we've had challenges with paying some of our debtors also when it comes to natural gas. But you're saying beyond that, we could have still renegotiated, paid them and bought from them, and that would have saved us instead of resorting to light crude oil.
Yes. For example, gas in Nigeria, if we were spot on with our payments, and there is a shortage of gas from Atuabo because of maintenance, we could ask NGAS to increase the gas supply, and it will be cheaper than light crude oil. So there is that option. But when your payment record is such that you can't go to the market with your payment record, it becomes difficult. They are reluctant to give you additional credit because of your own history, payment history. So we needn't have, indeed, as we speak, as of this week, the processed gas coming from the ENI FPSO, the quantum has been reduced by close to about 40 million standard cubic feet a day.
And
again, we haven't paid them for 3-4 months.
Okay, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, just so our listeners can appreciate this 40 million standard cubic feet of gas, how many watts of power can it generate?
Well, that is more than enough to fire 2 of our thermal plants, depending on which 2.
Which would amount to between, say, how many megawatts of power?
Anything from 300 to 500, depending on the choices we make.
Okay. Go ahead. So, as it stands now, Dr. Donkor, finally, does it look like there's hope for our power sector? What we are going through now, does it look like it would end anytime soon, or we are in for the long haul?
Well, my wish as a Ghanaian is to say there is hope, that the good people of Ghana should not be subjected to this. That is my wish. But what I read today leaves much to be desired. We probably will have to go through this for a few more months. And as the government comes to the end of its tenure, there is a tendency to pile on debt for the next government. And we must raise the alarm.
Dr. Kwabena Donkor, thank you very much for joining us. We're grateful you made time to join us this morning.
All right. Now, this interview is also available on our Facebook and YouTube channels. You can go check it out. If you missed any part of it, go play it back.